Hello and welcome to New Wave Global. You are watching Unraveled with Marvi Sirmed, where we cover the pressing issues of our times with a focus on human rights, democracy, and the complex geopolitics of South Asia. Tonight, we turn our attention to a region at the center of conflict and controversy for decades, the disputed Himalayan region of Jammu and Kashmir, divided into Pakistan and India administered regions. 5 years after the Indian government's controversial move to revoke Article 370 and strip the region of its special status, the political landscape in India administered Kashmir has been irrevocably altered. A recent article in Foreign Policy magazine has offered a strongly reasoned critique of the Modi government's approach in Jammu and Kashmir and warned of the potential consequences if the current trajectory continues without meaningful political and diplomatic engagement. But here, we must note that we are also witnessing an unexpected phenomenon amidst this atmosphere of disenfranchisement and heavy militarization, an unprecedented voter turnout in the ongoing state elections, and the participation of even the former members of the separatist groups and banned outfits who once rejected and boycotted the electoral process altogether. What is driving this change? What does it mean for the future of Kashmir? To help us unravel these questions, we are joined by a distinguished guest, Anuradha Bhasin, a respected voice in Kashmir's journalism. She has been at the forefront of reporting and analyzing the region's turbulent journey. She is the managing editor of the Kashmir Times and the author of A Dismantled State, the Untold Story of Kashmir after 370. She's also the writer of the Foreign Policy magazine article that I mentioned earlier, Kashmir 5 Years On. So, welcome, Anuradha. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me, Marvi.
So, let me dive straight into it before we come to the aftermath of the revocation of Article 370 that you discussed in your article. What do you think is driving this surge in electoral participation despite the revocation and the reduction of Kashmir's status to union territory? And what does it signify about the current political sentiments in the region?
It's very difficult to gauge with precision what exactly is driving the people to the polling booths because there has been complete silence in the last 5 years. Silence of the public, silence of the political voices, of the civil society, and a complete silence of the media. So we really don't know how people are thinking. But, just a few indications are that these are people who are driven by extreme alienation, disappointment, and absolute repression, where their voices have not been heard. And for them, the vote is probably one way of speaking out. And give expression to all their resentment that has been pent up for 5 long years. Secondly, the state has been deprived of, it has not just been stripped of its autonomy, it has also been left disenfranchised. And even though local governments in the past, by and large, were manipulated by New Delhi to some extent or the other, there was still a buffer between the people and the state repression, and they would at least be responsible for the basic day-to-day needs of the people, and they were accountable to the people. So there has been a long absence of a local government, and the state has been virtually ruled by New Delhi through its lieutenant governor, and its army of bureaucrats. And the bureaucracy, without a democratic functioning, have become extremely arrogant. So it's also the enthusiasm is also there on the ground because people are fed up and they want some limited amount of relief.
Hmm. So, yeah, and we have also. I was just looking at some of the coverage coming from the Indian media, different Indian media outlets. One thing that struck me was the difference in the tone of people in the valley and in the mountainous region of Jammu. So in Jammu, there were a lot of people speaking very favorably of BJP. That they are still majority Muslims, but they were speaking very favorably of Mr. Modi and BJP, and their argument was that the government has given us ST status, which will change our generations. What do you think about that? How that has is that a factor in this massive turnout?
I don't think that's played a factor in the massive turnout.
Mhm.
Another thing that I didn't add is why people, and this is overall the state, is
Mm,
that even though people are disappointed with what has been taken away, they're also realistic because the hands of the clock have never gone back in Kashmir. And so they are trying to make the most of everything. As
mm,
far as you talked about the Muslims and this is in the Pir Panjal area, in the Rajouri
yes.
and Poonch border districts, where the Pahadis have been given ST status, which they had been demanding for some time.
Mm,
While that is that was a card that did not play in favor of the BJP during the parliamentary elections. A lot of Pahadis, the Pahadi vote was divided. The Pahadis comprise of Hindus as well as Muslims,
mm,
and though the Muslims are in the majority, so a lot of Pahadis did not vote for the BJP proxy candidate in the parliamentary elections.
okay.
Now, what people say openly and what they do in the polling booths may be two different things because there is an overwhelming level of fear that still exists in the public. At the
Mm,
same time, the BJP's campaigning machinery is extremely strong, though it does not seem visible on the ground. And you would think, there are not many rallies, they're not meeting many people, they are going extremely hyper local. BJP has all the resources in the world. It is a cash rich party. It has a large army of not just BJP cadres but RSS cadres from across India. And many of them are camping in particularly the Jammu region
mm,
and fanned out in different directions. They're meeting communities, they're holding smaller campaigns, door to door campaigns, and they're trying to convince people that we gave you, and one of them is that we gave you ST status. So now, you need to pay back the favor.
mm,
Whether that leads to votes or not, we don't know, but BJP definitely is weaponizing that. Now, having said that, at the same time, this area that we're talking about, while the Pahadis have been given the ST status, this status was only enjoyed by the Gujjars and the Bakarwals, the nomadic tribes of this region. And so, while five assembly segments out of eight in these two districts have been reserved for the STs,
mm,
so the ST status has become irrelevant to the detriment of the Gujjars and the Bakarwals, who would otherwise have benefited out of the ST reserved seats, which, if the Pahadis had not been given the
mm.
status, the five seats would have been automatically be
Yeah.
reserved for the Gujjars and the
Mhm, mhm,
Bakarwals. So there's a lot of resentment among the nomadic population at the same time. So even if they manage to gain some votes among the Pahadis, there is every reason to believe that the Gujjars and the Bakarwals will vote against them.
Okay. That's very interesting. That's the nuance that and also that, another question popped in my mind was about the political dynamic. While we're talking about the political dynamics and the complexities, do you think the emergence of Engineer Rashid is a genuine emergence of third force, third political force, or as some people are saying, many people are saying, he is and his party is a proxy of BJP there.
Look, I have no evidence to say that
Mhm.
he's a proxy but he won the parliamentary elections from jail in from North Kashmir,
Mhm.
um, defeating Omar Abdullah by a huge margin.
Yeah.
And while that campaigning seemed very organic, and you can manage to some extent
Mm.
in a place where people are driven by emotions,
Mm.
because there are long pent up feelings.
Mm.
His family started the campaign, some of his party people joined in, and it caught on village after village.
Mm.
While one could believe that that was organic,
Mm.
it's very difficult to believe that he's now out of jail in a UAPA case where bails are difficult, and particularly so if you are a Kashmiri Muslim,
Mm.
though it's not impossible. And to contest suddenly 40 elections without resources, elections in 40 seats as independents. Now, to do that in so little time with so little resources, questions do arise about what really is behind this force.
Mm.
We don't have any evidence whether the BJP is manipulating it, but the BJP is definitely gaining out of the emergence of this third force, because any fragmentation of votes in Kashmir Valley, which is overwhelmingly Muslim majority, would suit the BJP, where there are indications that there's going to be a hung assembly. While on the one hand, it will stall the march of National Conference and the Congress alliance, at the same time, the engineer Rashid factor is helpful for the BJP in Jammu region, particularly in the Hindu majority Jammu region, where engineer Rashid is seen as a polarizing figure,
Mm.
because of his politics, because of his contested politics, his extremist views. The BJP is able to mobilize and consolidate the Hindu vote bank in Jammu.
Yeah. And he is, he is now part of the popular politics, electoral politics, so to say.
He was
And
always a
he's,
part of electoral politics. He has
yeah,
been a legislator twice, but he was seen as a kind of more pro-separatist voice within the
that's
Indian
right.
mainstream politics. Yes.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. So that's why I was hearing some of his recent speeches during the campaign, and he still is talking about, while being part of the electoral politics, he's talking about the self-determination, and that was something that that's very important to notice. But there are those who have historically boycotted elections, and now they are participating quite actively. What has prompted this shift, and how do you think their involvement will influence the political landscape and legitimacy of the electoral process in Kashmir?
It's very, very complex because you see people who openly called for boycott are now participating in the elections not just as voters but as
Candidate,
contestants.
yeah,
And this is particularly so in the case of Jamaat-e-Islami. There's
Jamaat
also
Islam.
another jailed pro-separatist cleric called Sarjan Barkati, who's
Mm.
contesting from two constituencies.
Yeah.
one interestingly against Omar Abdullah again. And well, I can't say why they are contesting, but why are people coming out in large numbers?
Hmm.
Is quite clear because people realize that if they stay away, they cannot be part of any decision making, and
Yeah.
they don't want to. There's extreme level of disappointment and anger against the BJP, and they want to give vent to it
Hmm.
as a form of revenge, as a form of making their point, and they do not want BJP to benefit from any boycott calls.
Hmm.
Um, so that basically seems to be a driving force. That people are thinking differently, they're thinking pragmatically, they know that the slogans of, emotive political slogans are not really going to do anything, and they would need to take part in the electioneering process.
Hmm.
So, which is why they're coming out to vote primarily.
Yeah. So after the can we say that the revocation of Article 370 has transformed the political and social landscape in Jammu and Kashmir by, because for the last 5 years, the people have been silenced with an iron fist, unprecedentedly. 5 years, complete silence. And now they think that this is the election is a very powerful mode of their expression. So they're expressing. Do you think this positive change has come out of the Article 370 revocation and snatching of the statehood from Kashmir?
And Farsight, I don't know if this is a positive sign, whereas people are looking at A, they want to exercise their legitimacy and
Hmm.
make their point. They want some relief in the form of a local government. And after elections, will all that be delivered? In view of the fact that any prospective legislative assembly of a
Hmm.
union territory which does not have the same federal power sharing agreement with the union
Hmm.
government would be able to deliver. Over and above that, in a recent order, the Lieutenant Governor, who is the pointsman, New Delhi's pointsman in Jammu and Kashmir, he will have overarching powers over the Legislative Assembly. So, any decision that the Assembly takes or the executive takes, unless he vets it, it's not going to be legal. So would this assembly have be able to deliver according to the expectations of the people? And
Hmm.
if that is the case, I'm not sure how positive the development eventually would be, because if despite the iron fist policies of the government, despite the level of repression, what people have been through, if there is a sliver of hope they have seen in these elections, once
Hmm.
that is dashed to the ground, what happens next?
That's right. So, given the report, there's some reported arrests and persecution of journalists and human rights defenders and lawyers, some politicians as well. What do you see as the most immediate human rights challenges in the region?
I think these are some of the most immediate human rights challenges here, that people
Freedom
are
of
being
expression
jailed.
and yeah.
And that is why, to a great extent, why Engineer Rashid's campaigning is gaining some momentum on the ground. He's
Hmm.
seen as a victim. He's talking about prisoners. But other than, imprisoning people, the human rights violations have continued in Kashmir, though they're not as visible. So they're much more subtle in the way this government executes them. They systemically, there is a way of systemically repressing people through verification processes, through continuous processes of interrogation. Any time a journalist writes any, even a small critical word, he would be summoned, he or she would be summoned to the police stations, questioned, interrogated. And the interrogations are not only about, why they did this story, or, compel them to disclose their sources, but also ask them personal questions about family members and extended family members. And this is something that is extremely intimidating, because in the valley, in recent years, in the last 5 years, several people have lost their jobs because their family members had something to do with separatism. And these are arbitrary decisions without any evidence placed on record, or without giving a chance to the people to. So,
No,
there
defend
are
them.
journalists whose family members have lost jobs already,
Mm.
on charges that, that these
Yeah.
journalists were engaged in some anti-national activity
Mm.
without giving them a chance to be heard.
Yeah. And what is, I mean, has that phenomenon of enforced disappearances ended, the half widows?
It's not there in the public domain.
Okay.
I mean, if you see, I keep wondering myself.
Mm.
Everybody's gone silent. So, at least the half widows and the parents of the disappeared persons, there were two groups, and they would continuously, regularly campaign. They were documenting cases, and they would hold their and organize their regular campaigns. For instance, one faction led by Parveena Hunger, they would assemble near Lal Chowk, which is in the city center, once a month, on the 10th of every month, and hold out a campaign, and try and involve more and more people, try and educate people,
Mm.
have a day-long sit-in. You don't see these kind of protests happening. You
Yeah.
don't know if they're still working on the ground. And if enforced disappearances are really happening or not happening.
Or whatever has become of those who were disappeared. Have they
They're
come?
not even pursuing their own cases
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
justice and
that's very
the
strange.
truth. So it
That's
is,
right.
it's very difficult. It is an indication itself that when there is no space for even seeking justice, and leave alone justice, and we forget about human rights violations, even to protest about basic issues of power curtailment,
Mm.
about faulty smart meters, about inflated electricity bills or water shortage. In Jammu and Kashmir, I mean, in Kashmir, the electricity supply was curtailed for 14 hours during peak winters.
Mm.
In Jammu, the same is happening during peak summers.
Mm.
And people don't really come out to protest. Why?
Yeah. Because there has been a systemic suppression of dissent. I mean,
Of
I
course,
think, yeah.
absolutely, absolutely.
So this, suppression of dissent has impacted so many things, even people's own readiness to stand up against the injustice. But how has it impacted local journalism?
Local journalism, I think it has been impacted much, much more, and which is why people's voices go silent.
Mm.
If larger chunk of journalists had kind of tried to resist to some extent, uh, you know, uh, and it wouldn't have been so bad.
Mm.
But not to say that there is no state repression, there is a state repression, but there is also an abject surrender by a vast chunk of journalists, making it different for the others who are continuing to work and are trying to work.
Mm,
Now, all this, it's a vicious cycle. You know, you control the journalists, you've controlled all the voices. You've silenced everybody else because the journalists are going to speak for everyone else as well.
mm,
Um, so there you go, you know, which is why people do not feel empowered enough to talk about their problems. So even if they come out on the roads, the journalists are not going to report it. They're not going to talk about it if they are repressed for protesting. So they will stop coming out.
yeah. And Indian Supreme Court, we see that it has endorsed the a revocation of Article 370. What do you think? Do you think has the judiciary played an independent role in Kashmir, or has it been complicit, if it's not a very strong word, in the erosion of civil liberties, or staying silent, or what do you think?
Yes, the civil liberty, it's interesting, you know, right in the very beginning when 370 was abrogated, even
Hmm.
for the habeas corpus petitions which were not being entertained,
Hmm.
you had to go right up till the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court did maintain its silence. So when it comes to the larger political question, which was tied to BJP's major, one of the major ideological points, removing Article 370 or taking away Kashmir's autonomy, the Supreme Court role was quite disappointing,
Hmm.
but it was not unexpected because before that it had already decided on the Ayodhya case in a similar way,
Yeah.
where the court says that this is wrong, but still gives the people who demolished them. You say that the
Yeah.
demolition of the mosque was wrong, but then you give the land away to the people who demolished it.
Mm.
And in terms of when it comes to Kashmir, it's probably much worse because Supreme Court, even in the past, has not addressed the questions of human rights violations on Kashmir.
Mm.
Um, to address the issue of injustices.
Mm.
But, at least on 370, it had maintained that this cannot be abrogated. Now, that decision has been overturned
Mm.
uh, by the three-bench Supreme Court decision. There was an outright rejection of all the constitutional debatable points.
Yeah. Which is very unfortunate. People, every people in every country, in every region, they turn to the courts for their major issues. It's terrible if people start believing that the courts will not be there for their help. But so turning back to the local assembly, with the local assembly having very limited powers, what do you think can be done to ensure that the local governance in Kashmir reflects the will of the people, especially in the context of, in the ongoing elections where, a lot of people are coming out to vote in the hope that the governance will reflect their will.
You can't expect much from the BJP because what they did in Jammu and Kashmir was motivated by their ideological moorings.
Mm.
But this is also Modi 2.5, as they say, which is a much more weakened government.
Hmm.
Will they um, now deal with Kashmir in a different way? I don't think that would be the case, um, at least in Kashmir.
Hmm.
So even if this government is to be ousted, any other non-BJP government that takes over will need to take a much stronger initiative and withstand the pulls and pressures of the BJP and the RSS, which is going to be a formidable force, even if it is out of power,
Mm,
and understand that the disaster that is unfolding in Kashmir, and Kashmir being having the kind of complex history that it has, being at a strategic corridor in geopolitics, being a nuclear flashpoint, they would need to address the issue and understand that people's will cannot be crushed endlessly only through military jackboots. And they will need to respond to the people and meet at least some of their wishes and aspirations.
mm. We hope so. Um, Now, I want to bring in another question which we do not hear much about, and you have covered it in your article. When you have spoken about the ecological fallout from the massive infrastructure projects. Could you elaborate on the long-term environmental consequences for the region and how these projects are being, you know, conceived or the perceived by the local communities? Do they think that these development projects are doing good? Because in lot of regions, in a lot of countries, people think that these projects are doing good for them, creating jobs, but then no one thinks of environmental consequences. So what is it in Kashmir like?
I think the opinions do remain divided to some extent because, there are people who are taken in by that narrative. Okay, so much investment is coming, something good is going to happen. Jobs will come, but jobs have not really come so far. So while jobs are coming, there are also outsiders competing for the jobs.
Yeah.
And that may be one aspect. But in the rural areas, you see people, there are more anxieties because there are areas, and you can't just blame, to be fair, you can't just blame the present BJP government. Even governments in the past have had development policies which were extremely warped and detrimental to the ecological impact without making proper, scientific ecological assessment of these projects, whether it was railway projects, roadways, or mining projects. But I think the BJP has done this, done the same on a much more massive scale. And it's already showing an impact. Like, so you say, for instance, the roadway project and the railways project, there has been massive level of tunneling through the Himalayan region.
Mm,
And also because of the hydropower projects, the people in Jammu and Kashmir, by and large, are also beginning to feel that, if there are so many hydroelectric power projects coming, the electricity is not meant for them because they're facing, power curtailments, whereas the electricity is going outside. What they are being made to face is the ecological brunt of that. There are in the Chenab Valley, in Doda region, there are mountainous areas that are slipping and sinking.
mm,
There have been houses that have been damaged. So people are understanding, the local communities are understanding how they are going to be impacted by all of this. There is also a massive emphasis on tourism.
mm,
And while there may be a jugglery of figures where tourism is concerned, because there are tourists who go to these touristy spots. There is also a heavy influx of pilgrimage tourism, both in Jammu region, where there is a famous Vaishno Devi pilgrimage, which brings the highest number of tourists in the state, and the seasonal. There are several other seasonal pilgrimages.
mm,
And there's so much emphasis on these, and most of these are in the higher Himalayas,
mm.
where they may have a detrimental impact on the glaciers and the ecology of the region. So
So
there
there's
are concerns about this.
mm.
And I think for this, probably the way out is not only to think about Jammu and Kashmir, because the Himalayan region across South Asia is probably undergoing similar
That's true. Yeah.
challenges. And
Mm.
I think there would be a need to probably create a network of people and civil societies within these regions to find a solution out.
That's right. I think the groups who are working on people-to-people contact and, track two and track three diplomacy, they must, include these issues as well, because this is very critical for environment and climate change. Um, so, Anuradha, what steps do you believe are necessary for New Delhi to take in order to heal the political wounds and mistrust in Kashmir?
I think it's very important for New Delhi to do that. Even though I don't have much faith in the BJP doing it right now, I probably have very little faith even in any other government that replaces it. But nonetheless, it's important for them to understand that there needs to be a reach out. People in Jammu and Kashmir, and not just Jammu and Kashmir, in Ladakh, which has been completely disenfranchised and is without a legislative assembly. Even now, there is a massive campaign
Mm,
building up against, the outsider influx and major investments from outside and of, handing over Ladakh to bureaucracy. I think the government needs to listen to communities and hear their grievances. And
mm,
different communities would have different grievances. I would say Jammu and Kashmir is very, very diverse. They need to, as a first, they need to give back at least the statehood and full-fledged statehood, not a kind of quasi-statehood like New Delhi, but give them complete statehood with autonomy to decide on their own day-to-day matters and on their own fiscal matters, administrative matters, at least that to begin with.
mm.
And then the process of dialogue is, I think, endless, which must continue even in areas which do not have a history of conflict.
Mm.
That's probably the best practices in democracy, and that needs to start with an immediacy in Jammu and Kashmir.
Yeah. You also stressed the need for diplomatic negotiations with Pakistan. Given the current political climate in both countries, how realistic is the prospect for meaningful dialogue, and what could be the first step towards this?
The current situation doesn't seem very conducive for any kind of a dialogue, but and I don't think the geopolitical equations at the time also do not favor a dialogue within the South Asian region. But I think it's the leadership from within South Asia which will have to stop looking at the West or the East or anywhere, but seize the initiative and understand that it is for their own good, rather than using small episodes to show down each other and fight down each other.
Mm,
And we can't keep doing that endlessly. It is to the detriment of the people of India, of Pakistan, of rest of South Asia, if we are infighting and fail to see that there is need to bridge the differences, need to move towards cooperation.
mm.
And we can, I think that's the only way to move forward and move forward without preconditions. Um, I think from any side, whether it's Pakistan talking about Kashmir being the Sharag or India harping on terrorism, I think despite all of that, we need to talk. We need to talk even to iron out these differences.
Mm. That's right. But uh, you must recall former President Trump once offered mediation between Pakistan and India for Kashmir. Do you think international mediation or international pressure can contribute to peaceful resolution?
Look, we've been that path before. I mean, in 2002, there are all signs that America, brokered the peace process, and that
Yeah.
is why. But once American interests stopped, India and Pakistan stopped talking to each other, whether we blame the Mumbai terror attacks or whether we blame, lack of initiative
Yeah.
from both sides. They almost reached close to an understanding.
Yeah.
And then we were back to square one. As far as Trump's offer is concerned, I mean, I won't take Trump on face value for many, many reasons. But right after Trump offered, we had the 370 abrogation. So I really don't know what really went behind the scenes in the US at that time.
Yeah. We can only hope that you are being heard by New Delhi and things start happening on those lines and things get better for not just the people of Jammu and Kashmir, but also the entire South Asia. Thank you very
Okay.
much, Anuradha.
Thank
I
you.
really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.